What's up, guys? So what I want to talk about in tonight's video is I want to talk about St. Augustine specifically and his view on typology between Jacob and Esau, and then with the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, between the original covenant with Israel and then with the church. And then also, what is it symbolizing that Jacob wraps himself in a skin that was not his? Okay, that's specifically as he goes to his father for him to touch it and feel like it's furry like Esau. Okay, what I want to talk about in this video is how that is actually typological for something far more profound and significant that will come later. Now, really quickly, if you like the contents of this channel, keep in mind that a subscription, a like can really help push this content forward, especially a subscription. As a young channel, any subscription we get is appreciated and certainly can help us grow. So I just want to give a plug for that if you feel so moved and if you want to see more content like this. Okay, so like I was saying, keep in mind that there are two brothers, okay? The first ends up giving up his birthright unto the second, okay? And this is really important. But then also keep in mind at the end of the story, the first and the second forgive one another and embrace, okay? So there's a sense here in which we can see the old covenant passing into the new covenant that includes Jews and Gentiles, right? So the covenant with Israel passes to the one with Israel and the Gentiles, okay? And there's this embracing together, okay? So that's one way you can think about it. It's passing on to the new covenant. And then secondly, Jacob wraps himself in a skin that is not his when his father reaches down to touch it. Now, St. Augustine talks about this being actually a type for Jesus being crucified. And in his flesh, what's going on is he's bearing the sins of the world, of humanity in his flesh, the sin that was not his. Okay, so Jesus is unblemished, right, in his person, and then sin is condemned in the flesh of Jesus once and for all. And so you could think about it this way. The next time you read this story, it's a very intriguing and mysterious story, the story of Jacob and Esau. But really, it's always pointing at something, a much richer reality, which is really about the new covenant, Christ and the church, and then how Jesus bears the sins of humanity as the unblemished lamb, so that we might be forgiven and freed, and that the Gentiles and the Jews would be able to fully participate in the covenant, and that we would then be able to, again, be redeemed so we can do the purposes of God in our lives by the power of the Holy Spirit. So there's something to think about tonight. It's a beautiful connection here, and it's a very profound one that St. Augustine makes, but it's definitely one that's food for thought. God's peace, y'all, and have a good evening.